Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some r/EntitledPeople for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading the post, giving you my opinions at the end, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Aria AC. Our friend's entitled sister tried to force her way into our trip to Egypt. This story happened quite a few years ago with me and my friends, but after reading quite a few stories in the subreddit, I feel now is a good time as any to share this post. On November 2019, me and a couple of my friends, who I will call Haley, Rose, and Rachel, were given an opportunity to travel to the Valley of Kings in Egypt. Note that we are archaeology graduates. While our families and friends were excited and proud of us to be able to go on this trip, Rachel's family did not feel the same way. Rachel's younger sister, who I'll call Lisa, was the golden child of her family. Anything she wanted, her parents gave to her. While Rachel had to take out a student loan to pay for college, Lisa's parents paid for her tuition, only for Lisa to drop out in 2 years. Instead, Lisa chose to try and build a career being a model and influencer on Instagram. When Rachel mentioned that she was going to Egypt with us, that our plane tickets and accommodation have been already taken care of for archaeological fieldwork, Lisa got jealous as she felt that a trip, taking photos of herself in Egypt for Instagram, would help launch her modeling career. That said, their parents demanded that Rachel give her tickets to Lisa as they felt Lisa was more deserving of it, to which Rachel obviously said no. It was already paid for by the foundation specifically for her and our group who were trained to do this kind of work, etc. According to Rachel, she's had back and forth arguments with her family leading up to the trip, that she eventually just left home and moved in with her boyfriend's, now husband, apartment. I held on to our plane tickets as we were all to meet up at my dad's place in the morning before we head off to the airport. At the time, I still lived with my dad. That said, as me, Rachel, Haley, and Rose were at my place just hanging out and getting ready, the car of Lisa and their mom pulled up as they came knocking on my door. Apparently, they were demanding one more time that Rachel give her ticket to Lisa. Lisa even had a couple of bags with her as well. Before I continue, just to give you a better understanding of Lisa and Rachel's family and why they may behave or think this way, Rachel is the only one in her family who has actually finished college. Rachel pretty much took care of herself for much of her childhood as her parents were too fixated on Lisa. Their parents moved to Los Angeles from Florida to try and become actors but failed. Moved up here for some reason, and now their dad works as a truck driver and their mom, I think, works at a grocery store. Rachel's family treated formal education and academia in general as a joke, and didn't really support the idea of anyone going to college until Lisa decided she wanted to try going to college herself, as previously mentioned. Haley then interjected, interrupting them and pointing out again that this was not a vacation. This was an archaeological trip and we were going there to do actual work. Haley went on to point out that it's Rachel's name on the plane ticket and our accommodation in Luxor. So she asked Lisa and her mom questions like, how do you think Lisa's going to get on the plane? Who will Lisa be traveling with in Egypt? And where will Lisa be staying there? Apparently, Lisa, despite not being friends with us at all, and her mom, expected the rest of us, me, Haley, and Rose, to just somehow convince customs to let her through and get on the flight, as well as expecting us to look after and accompany Lisa. I should also note that apart from Rachel, nobody in her family ever traveled on a plane before. Lisa and their mom have never been overseas, and the only international traveling their dad ever did was driving trucks to and from Mexico. That said, I'm guessing this is why they don't seem to know how plane tickets or customs work, but that's just my assumption. I then pointed out to Lisa that if she really wants to go to Egypt, she could just buy her own tickets to Egypt and book her own accommodation. However, Lisa said she didn't want to do any of that, and she wanted Rachel's place in our trip as she wanted all the expenses to be paid for, and for us to accompany her as she didn't want to travel by herself. Lisa and her mom eventually left after seeing that trying to argue and force her way into our trip was not getting them anywhere, with the four of us, me, Haley, Rachel, and Rose, flying off to Egypt. After the dig at the Valley of the Kings, we did get to go and do touristy stuff such as touring Cairo and seeing the pyramids of Giza. As for Lisa, while she still posts a lot on Instagram, she seems to have given up on a modeling and/or influencer career as she's now just working in a warehouse. After the pandemic, She did get to go on a vacation to Cancun though, but that's about it. Edit. I make it a point to print out paper copies of the tickets as I prefer to using paper rather than just showing them my phone, and needless to say, yes, we all had our passports and visas, except Lisa, who had a passport, sure, but I'm certain didn't have a visa. This kind of sibling favoritism has gotta just be like hella demoralizing. See, I was an only child. The closest thing I had to a sibling was my stepbrother, but once again, the dynamic is definitely different than from having an actual blood-related brother who I grew up with since I was like, an infant. But it cannot feel good to go through uni, earn a trip to the Valley of Kings for an archaeological dig, and then your sister finds out and now you have your parents hounding you that your sister deserves those tickets more than you for her Instagram modeling career. There's also just a lot more funny little details like them not understanding how plane tickets work or just how the world in general kind of operates, and them believing that by simply asking, suddenly a university paid for trip is going to be willing to change the itinerary to allow for one of the students' sisters to go on a fucking Instagram holiday instead of an archaeological dig. Like, yeah, that's gonna happen. Or the fact that she was just outwardly expecting OP and her friends to take care of her on vacation. And I don't want to start the whole rant about my own pet peeves that I have with how easy people think it is, oh, I can just go on a vacation and bada booey, I'll become an instantly famous Instagram model. If it was that easy, then every resident of a tourist destination would be an Instagram model. Instagram influencers don't sell the places they travel to, they sell a lifestyle. Or more of actually, they sell the desire to obtain that lifestyle. That's the depressing part. Search Winter 2. Friend acting weird I didn't pick her up. So me and one of my friends decided to have a girls' night out, and we were meeting at a restaurant downtown. Now, I drive, and she doesn't. So, like adults, we both make it to the venue our own way, no issues. While we're eating, she asks me how I got here, and I say I drove. She then goes, "Why didn't you say you were driving? You could have picked me up." The thing is, to get her, pick her up, and then get to the venue, it would have been double the time. It would have been 2 hours instead of just 1. Plus factoring in the fact that I would have had to have left my home earlier. I explained this to her and she just said, "Cool," and started being a little standoffish. Now, I'm not a bad friend, so I did drop her off home. It was night and I wanted to make sure she got home all right. I didn't ask her for gas, she never really offers, you have to ask her, and we went out with another friend of hers one time on a road trip, and her friend, it was my first time meeting the girl by the way, offered me gas money immediately on our way to the destination. My friend only then offered when her friend did. I just don't get expecting or wanting someone, even if it's a friend, to get you places. If someone asks me to hang out, my first thought would be, how am I getting myself there? Not, let me ask them or expect them to get me. So for me, if I'm like 10 minutes out from someone and they're on the way, or maybe it's a slight bit of an inconvenience to grab them, I don't normally mind taking the time to go and pick someone up, because it's a small inconvenience. But when it's like an hour away and you're now taking 2 hours of your day to pick them up because they don't want to make any kind of arrangements or anything along those lines, that sucks. Especially if they're not willing to even like attempt to chip in for gas money or something like that. And like, trust me, I get the frustration of being without a car in an American car-centric society, because there was a time when all the legal shit was going on. I had to get rid of my car and I was carless for probably around 8 to 10 months. And that was a pretty tricky time for me. And it was a lot of navigating and trying to figure out how to get things done, and just wasn't fun. And I felt like shit whenever I had to go and ask someone for a ride somewhere when it was just simply not feasible for me to Uber or Lyft. And it's not fun to have to do that. So for people who just feel like they're entitled to be given rides places, or that, it should just be expected that they get picked up or driven somewhere with no offer or aid for any kind of help with gas money for having to drive there, it sucks. Like, in my eyes, you are totally within your right to make no effort or have no desire to have a vehicle. That's entirely fine. But then to turn around and put the issues that causes onto others and just expect them to help you at any given moment? That sucks. And I'm not saying that the OP's friend in this post is doing that. I've just dealt with people and know people who have dealt with that. And my guess would be is considering how OP's friend is acting here, this is probably not an uncommon occurrence. Expensive Shake 2627. I pay my brother $100K a year and this is what I get. I spent the last 7 years building my business to support myself initially, and now my brother. He's had a lot of mental health struggles in his 20s, but pushed through. He left a stable white-collar job he hated and started a $12 an hour retail gig right before the pandemic. He got furloughed, I happened to get a call from a dream job I couldn't refuse, and I spent the next 3 months between training my brother and onboarding to this new company. 4 years later, I get reduced and forced, and we're working together again. You'd think he'd be grateful, or maybe you wouldn't considering we're in the Entitled People subreddit. He makes $100,000 a year doing work that should take 6 hours a day, max. I don't tell him when to work. I don't restrict his time off. He chooses what orders he wants to accept or reject. He has the ability to make $150,000 a year if he wanted to put in a full day's work. Sounds great, right? Wrong. He complains constantly. He has to respond to client inquiries from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., but because he's so busy, he needs my help. Despite the fact I already answer all of my messages outside of business hours and on weekends. If he sees that a message hasn't been responded to in an hour and I said I was helping that day, he berates me for not communicating that I'm offline and accuses me of not doing my job. He constantly tells me I don't care about the business, all while I'm literally completing double his workload, covering 3 times more hours of client chats. He's told me I need to tell him if I'm not going to be available and when I'm going offline, even though my schedule has zero impact on his responsibilities or expectations as an employee. I'm frustrated. I'm feeling like the actual rules are reversed, and in reality, he's just a super entitled brat. So while I don't know the ins and outs of this company, OP's brother is doing something that we used to call the manager's special back when I worked in fast food. We had managers that would not do their actual jobs, but they would delegate the shit out of any responsibility they had. They would assign themselves busy work so they would seem like they're doing more work than what was required, and constantly just be on everyone's ass so it seemed like they were doing their job more efficiently than they actually were. When the owners were around, they were as busy as possible, doing as much and micromanaging every little second to make themselves seem like these super agent employees that were just constantly just doing everything they possibly could. But the moment the owner left, they were doing jack shit, watching Netflix in the office, outside of range of the security cameras, and just delegating everything they possibly could. The manager special is inflating your responsibilities to make you seem more valuable than you actually are. If you're ever starting a self-grown business or perhaps even dealing with a manager who's doing this, keep an eye out for it because there's a big difference between actually doing your work and giving yourself a bunch of responsibilities so you have a perceived higher workload and you make the owners and bosses think you're actually worth the amount they're paying you. Now, on top of the manager's special, there's also the problem of hiring family members. Now, from what I've seen and from my experiences, if you hire a family member, you're going to see one of two things. They're either going to share your vision, put in extra work, and bust their ass to get to the finish line, or they're going to rely off of the cloud of, I'm family, you're not going to fire me. And they'll take advantage of special privileges and more lenience because they're family, and they don't think that you'll have the gall to actually fire them. Although OP probably stumbled upon the secret third option here, where they do the absolute bare minimum so they can skate by and get their paycheck, but then also overinflate their value so that way, really can't fire them now because they're doing their job, but they're also doing a bunch of extra stuff. Although in OP's case, it's getting nagged by their brother that he's not doing enough work. Anyways, moral of the story, be careful when hiring friends and family because the last thing you want is for them to take advantage of the connection or relationship and run you dry when you're just trying to give them a decent opportunity, and they turn around and just do jack shit. As tempting as it can be to help those closest to you, sometimes you just gotta hire outside your friends and family. The Foxtrot 86. My entitled sister thought she could make a living breeding pugs, and she let her kids live in the filth because of her dog hoarding. Early edit. I'm already getting hate for this post, and believe me, I don't blame anyone for it. I was spineless back then. I wanted to call CPS or something. But anytime I even so much as mused about it, the family laid into me. So I focused more on helping to take care of the dogs and kids. But my sister's increased toxicity only made it worse. And by the time that I did take action, it was after my sister was finally evicted. I'm not asking anyone to see me as a hero here. I was a coward. But what I'm posting is 100% the truth. That edit serves more as a disclaimer than anything else. My sister for years believed that she could make a living breeding pugs. She used to have a breeding pair she named after sibling characters. Ironically, the first time the female got pregnant, I had to help with the birth, and that pug had like 10 puppies. It was months of dealing with a stinky puppy pen, and my nephews and I having to take care of them while my sister wasn't home. She managed to find homes for all but one of the puppies, and the final one she refused to sell because he was too cute. I knew it. I knew from the start she'd want to keep one of the puppies for herself. She denied it, but then she did. Just to try and make it look like she wasn't keeping the puppy because she didn't want to sell him, she claimed she was giving him to her sons, and he'd be their dog. That was complete and utter BS, and we all knew it. That third pug was a menace, and it only made all 3 pugs one terrible group of troublemakers. They urinated on the floor so much, they rusted out the vents. And my nephews didn't really take care of the third pug as my sister claimed they were supposed to as their dog. So she threatened she'd give away the third pug many times, but didn't, and would cry if called out on it because he's so cute. And after 2 years of that, it finally was too much for her and she gave the third pug away. She couldn't sell him like the prior puppies because he was full grown and neutered. Somehow, the mother pug didn't have another pregnancy that took until my sister was evicted from the family property. We were kind of thankful for that. I ended up taking care of these pugs as much as my nephews while my sister wasn't home. The first pug that became the papa dog wasn't so bad, but the female that became the mama was a nightmare for a while. That dog developed some twisted need to shit exclusively on my sister's bed. My sister once came home to, I kid you not, 9 piles of poop from that one pug on her bed. I'd see this dog come running into the bedroom after going outside, jump on the bed, and give you a look like she doesn't care what you think, and she would drop a deuce wherever she felt like, which would usually be on the bed as soon as you weren't watching her. And this dog was punished for it many times, but she refused to stop. It got to the point where we had to keep her caged and the bedroom door perpetually closed. But she kept finding a way in if she was let out of the cage. Eventually, it got to the point where I was taking zero BS from this dog. I decided one day she was not going to go back inside until she pooped, and the dog really did not like that, especially since it was cold outside and the ground was wet. I watched as she would sniff around, make a motion like she was going to take a dump, then would just whine while looking around and move on. She did this a few times, then looked over at my sister's trailer, and suddenly started running towards it all of a sudden with a look of complete glee on her face like she was thinking, I want to shit there. I stopped the dog and forced her to come back. She looked at me like I was a killjoy and just sat down to pout and stare at me. I told the dog I had all day, and she finally got bored enough to go back to sniffing around. She tried to make a break for the trailer 2 more times. Finally, after like 45 minutes, she couldn't hold it in anymore and took a dump. But I could tell she had more in her. So I kept waiting around and she finally took another dump because I wasn't taking her back to the trailer. The march back was like a walk of shame for her because she knew she'd lost and put up no fuss when I put her back in the cage. I kept up that routine until eventually she finally stopped trying to poop on the bed. Eventually, my sister's at the time boyfriend brought home a puppy he got for free. This puppy was adorable, but grew into an absolute monster bigger than my Akbash dog. He was huge and pissed and shit on the floor all the time, especially right near my middle nephew's bed. When put on his tether outside, he would bark constantly. On days I had migraines, the dog drove me nuts, and he made it impossible for anyone to sleep at times, especially my father. This dog was so strong that he broke his chain tether numerous times. They couldn't use rope because he'd chew through it. He chewed through everything. The fifth-wheel trailer my sister was living in on our property at the time she bought brand new, and that dog just destroyed it, even worse than the pugs did. That dog also destroyed plenty of stuff belonging to my nephews. Clothes, shoes, toys, anything it could get in its mouth. I had to fix my middle nephew's shelves with duct tape. We told my sister many times that she had to get rid of this dog. Even gave her an ultimatum more than once, but she still refused. She finally sold the dog to someone who had one of the same breed and had wanted another one, and treated us like we'd ruined her life by making her get rid of this dog that she could not handle. Soon after, my ex-brother-in-law took his kids away from there and refused to bring them back. Not long after, my sister was given the boot, and she was out by January. When my sister got an eviction notice from the family property in 2023, she moved in with her only remaining friend and started breeding her pugs again. And just like last time, she kept the cutest one. Then her best friend kicked her out, and my sister got a new boyfriend who was also her drug dealer, and moved in with him. Then her abusive boyfriend kicked her out and left her in a broken down RV trailer on the side of the road. And then he left her with a car that barely ran. By then, she'd burned like 98% of the bridges she had because she's an entitled narcissist. She spent 2 days living with her boyfriend's sister and let her pugs piss and shit all over the bedroom floor, and didn't clean up any of it. So the lady kicked her out. I had to clean it all up when I came and got her and her stuff. And then I had to spend a day following her numerous places with all her stuff in the back of my truck while she was trying to find someone to take her in. Most of the people she tried to get in touch with wouldn't return her calls or messages, and I was the only one walking her damn dogs. She just sat in her car on her phone the entire time, and then she tried to force me to take her dogs home with me, but I couldn't, because our parents are my landlords, and they said no. And she lost her mind. She spent the night in a car full of junk with 3 pugs. She didn't even have food for the dogs. I had to buy her some because she was broke. The next day, our mother got her a motel room for the night, and she was completely ungrateful for it. Then she went right back to her abusive boyfriend the next day. I just dumped her stuff on his front yard and left. My sister finally had to surrender the mom and dad pugs to a rescue, but she kept the puppy. I'd previously told her she needed to give away all the dogs because she couldn't care for them if she was homeless. She said she'd think about giving up the 2 parent pugs, but she refused to part with the puppy. I told her that trying to raise a puppy on the streets wouldn't be good for the dog, and she ranted that dogs were great for the mental health of homeless people, and that she needed him. My sister was previously in touch with a pug rescue, but stopped talking to them. I looked this rescue up and gave them a call, and they were worried for the safety of the pugs. So worried that they called me back to ask for or tell me updates in the situation. Eventually, they called me and said my sister had surrendered the 2 parent dogs to them, and they gave her $100 each for them. I don't know if that was a normal thing to do or if my sister extorted money for the dogs since they were purebreds and a breeding pair. They didn't clarify, but both dogs were highly adoptable, they told me, and likely found homes fairly quickly, if not even maybe sent to the same home. My sister also had a tabby cat she couldn't take care of, and begged I take him. Not only did I take in the cat, I refused to return him to her later. He loves it here, and he was raised here. When I brought him home, he started purring the second I pulled in the driveway, and I mean aggressively purring. He couldn't see where he was because he was in his carrier, but he knew by smell. As soon as I let him out of the carrier, he was running around the yard like, "I'm home!" My sister previously took him to live in a drug den with her abusive boyfriend and would take him right back into that sort of life if I'd let her. I recently had him chipped and registered in my name just to keep her from taking him away. She's an animal hoarder. She'll keep dogs and cats and then just won't clean up after them. And if she has the money or the room, she'll get more. Over 20 years ago, she was living in an old manufactured home with 20 cats she was letting piss and shit all over the place. I had to clean it all up for her many times because she wouldn't do anything. And when called out on it, she'd cry and say the cats were like her babies. I tell you, you don't know nothing about cleaning cat poop till you've had to use a shovel. Those cats were just pooping on top of more poop. It was like shoveling moist clay. At least I clean up after my cats. Recently, my sister showed up wanting her cat back, and I kicked her off the property. She threatened to report me, but hasn't. Probably because we know she's doing meth and crack and doesn't want cops snooping around. When she wasn't looking, I saw the cat run away from her and hide under my house. And normally, he's friendly with everybody. Then he started following me and meowing like mad. He did not want to go with her. So the first thing that I want to kind of talk about is just, I'm happy that the nephews were able to get out of this situation, and I'm happy that she did eventually surrender the dogs to a rescue shelter, and, you know, those animals can actually live healthy and happy lives outside of her, well, honestly, abusive tendencies. I realize that I inadvertently kind of just called her nephews animals, but that's not the point I'm trying to make here. I'm just trying to state that I'm happy that everything that was caught in her mess of a storm that was her lifestyle eventually found their way out, for better or for worse. And OP already put their disclaimer for their guilt attached to the fact that they didn't do what they considered to be enough for both the children and the animals that were left in this horrific situation. And it's in the past, so I can't really harp that much on it, but hopefully those of you in the audience can at least learn from it. And that's what I can hope for. And now it's time for the tricky moral and philosophical question here of, at what point in time do you just stop caring and let a family member fall to their own devices here? Because OP is going out of his way, just constantly doing everything they can to aid their sister no matter what, and she never learns, she never recovers, she never does anything to better herself, and she's always being cleaned up after, and she's always putting herself in worse and worse situations. So, at what point do you just stop and let them fall? Because this is someone who just very clearly has no empathy or sympathy or care for the people around them and just see them as means to an end. So, at what point do you do the same? I'm asking you, the audience here, because this is an incredibly complex and nuanced question, and I'm actually really more curious to kind of hear what the general thought and response is, because this is something where it really shows, I guess, where we have our lines in humanity. If you're willing to stick around and do everything in your power to help someone, or if you do have a line in the sand that once it's crossed, it's sink or swim, baby, have fun at rock bottom. So I'd be curious, and I feel like this could be an interesting learning experience for everyone involved. I also do want to thank everyone who commented extremely nice things on yesterday's episode when I was dealing with a lot of just internal stresses and pressures, and it really does mean a lot to hear so many of your words and hear that just because I may not be able to reach the poster, I am able to reach you all and help you all with your experiences and your lives and grow as people and become better and learn from the mistakes of others so we can, one step at a time, become better people. Myself included, I learn from all of you all the time, and I'm incredibly appreciative of that. And I think after yesterday, I've learned that I want to encourage that and keep that trend going. For both myself to learn and for all of you to learn with me. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.